Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, I'll be speaking exclusively with Bolaji Osunsanya, the Managing Director of the Sub-Saharan Gas and Power Portfolio Company, Accela, in Lagos, Nigeria. The Nigerian federal government has dubbed 2020 the Year of Gas. I'll be getting his thoughts on what this means for the sector. And earlier this week, a new Israeli platform held a first-of-its-kind food security conference, connecting Israeli technology companies with African countries to tackle the challenge of feeding the continent's rapidly growing population. I'll be speaking with Vered Mitzrari from Startup Nation Central in Tel Aviv, Israel, about a burst of diplomatic activity that's improving relations between Israel and Africa. Then later, I'll be speaking with Jomas Associates founder Ronnie Savage and Joe Maxwell of the PEP Network, both in London, about the pink-collar recession, women who have been disproportionately affected in the workplace due to the COVID-19 lockdown. But first, markets were sent into a frenzy earlier this morning after the US President Donald Trump confirmed over Twitter that he had tested positive for COVID-19, alongside the First Lady Melania. On Friday morning, Trump tweeted, "Tonight, Flotus and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together." The health of US presidents has always been a hot-button issue for financial markets, from when Reagan got shot to when George Bush Sr. fell ill at a dinner in Japan. This time is no different, with market reaction being immediate as US stock futures plunged sharply.
Now, initially, we did not know how investors would react to this because it is a sudden shock, but at the same point, we had many markets in Asia were closed for the Golden Week holidays, so we couldn't really have anything to judge by sentiment towards what's going to kind of guide us as Europe wakes up. But then, as the news started to get around, we saw increased buying demand for the US dollar as a safe haven asset. Now, some of that has started to fizzle out now, and we had a lot more appetite for the Japanese yen, which again is another proxy for investors in times of uncertainty. But overall, we still don't have very much information other than the president has tested positive. We do not know if this is going to impact the upcoming presidential election, and we're just expecting for this to now add further weight into what has been a very unforeseen, unpredictable and an unknown time for investors overall this year.
Now over to our next topic. According to the federal government, 2020 is the year of gas in Nigeria, following the recent launch of the Nigeria Gas Expansion Programme, which is expected to create 12 million jobs and assist in the diversification of the economy. The scheme would provide a major boost to the labour market, with unemployment currently standing at 27.1%. Joining me now from Lagos, Nigeria is Bolaji Osunsanya, the Managing Director of the Sub-Saharan Gas and Power Portfolio Company, Accela. The Nigerian government has called 2020 the Year of Gas. How significant is the role that gas has in ensuring Nigeria diversifies its economy?
Thank you, Juliana. It's a season we've been waiting for, that Nigeria ultimately realizes that it's indeed not just a mono economy. Within the petrol sector, there's also a gas that so far has not been fully utilized. I think now we realize that gas can be a catalyst of development. Now we realize the potentials of gas in helping us unlock these emerging markets. And I think now that the focus is on gas, we will start to derive all the benefits.
We've heard from the federal that they believe the natural gas expansion programme will create 12 million direct and indirect jobs. Very optimistic. Do you share in that optimism?
Well, not so optimistic. I think it can even do more if well channeled. You must see gas as the fulcrum of the economy. Gas is the only one that can help industrialization. Gas is also what can transform agriculture. Gas is what you almost can put in all facets of life. If gas is able to be utilized properly, even for power energy, you can imagine what that will do to all the subsistence and vocational businesses around us. And if the objective is to create employment and improve domestic production, then certainly gas will be a big change agent in that regard. I think there are well over 180, 190 million Nigerians. Gas potentially can do more than 12 million jobs if well channeled.
Accella's made its debut market entry. How has that changed the culture of the business and yourself?
Well, I mean, Accela has been in the business for the last 20 years. So for us, it's a staged or stepped development time. COVID came and it had a major disruptive implication for most businesses. Luckily for us, because of the inelasticity of the commodity that we carry, not much of that impact was felt by Accela. We had most of our industries being essential producers of goods and services, still operating even whilst the scourge raged. So we were active. We were only last week comparing our numbers. We're still achieving almost all that we achieved in 2019 in the current year, despite the scourge. Yes, it doused a little bit of optimism around growth, but we've kept the ship pretty stable. In terms of the bond issuance, I think we did the times. It was a very precarious period to be trying to debut the capital market in Nigeria. But because it was a big part of our long-term plan and it was focused on our growth projects going into the future, it was important that we came out when we did. And thankfully, the market also appreciated that we were the first midstream gas company that was coming into the market, which created, even for the investors, a well-diversified portfolio. For us, the monies were meant to target our growth projects, largely to expand our existing pipeline distribution assets, and to also look at all the other processing quasi plans that would help us ensure supply security. So because it was targeted and because we also were in the process of our continental expansion, I think all just came together to raise that money. It was oversubscribed, and we're very thankful to the capital markets for that recognition.
Absolutely, and what a timely debut entry, considering it is the year of gas, as also affirmed by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo recently. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. Bolaji Osunsanya, the CEO of Accela Group, Sub-Saharan Gas and Power Portfolio. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juliana. It's a pleasure.
To our next topic, earlier this week, the Israeli platform Improvate held a first-of-its-kind food security conference connecting Israeli technology companies with African countries to tackle the challenge of feeding the continent's rapidly growing population. This online gathering is just one example in a series of diplomatic activities that is improving relations between Israel and Africa. For more on this evolving relationship, joining me from Tel Aviv, Israel, is Vered Mifzari, the Strategic Countries Director for India and Africa from Startup Nation Central. Vered Mifzari, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. I've got a quote for you. Africa's coming back to Israel. Israel is coming back to Africa. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier this year. The pandemic has slowed down the diplomatic love fest, shall we say. But do you think we're starting to see signs of these renewed relationships between Israel and Africa?
Yes, of course. Of course, we can see, and Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we can see today, and even on the over few years ago, we can see, and over few years, we can see that many Israeli startups and company operate in Africa and going trend and are seeing their on the ground in Africa. And I think the Israeli startups for them, it's a great interest to be in Africa and operate. And recently, we just finished to mapping the Israeli company that operates in Africa in many different stages, and we can see the trend of Israeli startups that they are active in Africa, mainly in agriculture and in healthcare as well. We can see more pilots and start of operation, but hopefully we will see the Israeli company do a good business and grow with a local partner in Africa.
Israel is the startup nation of the world. Everybody knows that. But I've got to tell you, you've got to run for your money, because Africa, it's not doing too badly. We've got a huge growing ecosystem. Before we run out of time, can you quickly tell me perhaps about some of the companies, some of the exciting companies that are part of your network that are doing business in Africa?
Okay, so I will start with a few words about Startup Nation Central. It's an independent non-profit organization that builds bridges to Israeli innovation. And I would like to emphasize that all our services are free, and we don't take any fee from any side that we work with, not from the startups, not from our partner. Like businesses, government, NGO, and other leaders around the world. And we offering Israeli innovators access to high potential and previously inaccessible markets through highly customized business engagement. And as integral part of our work, as I said, in Africa, so SNC, Startup Nation Central, accompanies project from concept through pilot to fully fledged business cooperation. And for your question, we can see today many companies, for example, there is a company that today, during the Corona, they provide open source for ventilators, and they give it for free for countries in Africa, and also in agriculture. I can say that the linkage to the market, Farmster, and also others company that they help for smallholder farmers with a linkage to the market, and those very strained and critical days during the COVID-19. And also in agriculture, we just started to work with Syngenta Foundation in order to help for smallholder farmers, and we provide a solution for, not we, there's a company by the name Ground Works BioAg. They provide a spatial unit that they put on the ground with a seed, and then it increases the roots for 30%. Wow. And then the yield also, and also they can reduce the water up to 50%.
There are so many. We're running out of time, and I hate to do this to you because there's so much for us to discuss. But the good thing about this is we can invite you back on the show next time. Vered Mitzvari, thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. Thank you. Coming up on Channels Business Global, I'll be discussing the pink collar recession with Ronnie Savage of Jomas Associates and Joe Maxwell of the Pet Network. See you after the break. Welcome back to Channels Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. In a moment, I'll be discussing the pink collar recession. But before then, here's some company news for you. On Monday, Uber was granted a new 18-month license to operate in London after a judge ruled the firm was fit and proper to work in the capital despite historical failings. Transport for London had denied the ride-hailing app a licence in November last year, citing breaches which compromised passenger safety and issues with transparency. Deutsche Bank is set to make flexible working policies permanent to allow staff to work from home on a set number of days per week. Like other lenders, Deutsche Bank has discovered during the pandemic that reducing office space could be a viable way to lower costs. Chief Executive Officer Christian Soeng said the board were working on a hybrid model that would allow employees to split their time working between the office and home. Hotel Chocolat has seen profits melt away as it counts the cost of the coronavirus pandemic. The chocolate maker and retailer reported a pre-tax loss of £7.5 million for the year to 28th of June, compared with a profit of £14.1 million the year before. Now over to our next topic. A recent report published by Cranfield University School of Management alongside the Female FTSE Board report suggests that although Britain's FTSE 350 looks on track to reach the target of 33% of women on boards by December 2020, a lack of representation at the top could be impacting on the number of women in the executive pipeline. The report coincides with statistics suggesting that women have been disproportionately affected by lockdown restrictions, a period now labelled pink collar recession. Jomas Associates founder Ronnie Savage and Joe Maxwell of the PEP Network share their thoughts. Ronnie Savage, founder of the Jomas Associates, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I know you're a very busy lady, so it is my pleasure. Just 5 of the FTSE 100 companies are run by women. I know you do go to a lot of these swanky dudes, or you probably did before the lockdown. Did you feel the lack of female presence?
Absolutely. I mean, I work in the construction industry, Jomas Associates being an engineering company serving the construction industry, a sector where only 12% of the workforce is female. And that's the entire workforce. You can imagine in leadership positions, there's a tiny percentage of women. So we've grown quite accustomed to not coming across another woman in the same position.
41% of the FTSE 350 companies haven't met the government targets of 33% of female representation on boards or senior positions. The business sec, Alok Sharma, says this should be achieved by the end of the year. We're already in October. Do you think that's likely?
I think it's very unlikely that those targets were met in 3 months in the middle of a pandemic. I think many companies have their focus on other things, that increasing the representation of women probably isn't the top of their agenda at the moment. So it is very unlikely, I think, that we'll see those numbers increase by December.
There's a term trending at the moment, you may not have heard of it, I've just read about it, called pink collar recession, and it's been dubbed that because women have been disproportionately affected, and that's really because they work part-time, or many of them do, in sectors that have been worst hit, like retail, like hospitality. Do you think campaigners are right in their concerns that potentially COVID could just unravel all of the achievements that have been, taken over the years to put women like you, successful women like you, at the top of businesses like Jomas Associates?
It is very possible. We've got, when you think about sectors that have been hit by this, you look at the hospitality sector, for instance, unfortunately, you find that the workforce in those sectors is predominantly female. And with those sectors being hit, obviously females are most affected. But also actually something to consider is the fact that in most families, women are seen as those who take care of the home or potentially care for the children. So with children being off school, with children being homeschooled, there is an impact on women as well in terms of not being able to go to work at all. So, yes, I think that we will see a significant impact from COVID on females generally.
Joe Maxwell, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. How have members of the PEP Network, as well as the Joe Maxwell Show community, been coping during lockdown?
Hi, Juliana. Thanks for having me. I think particularly a lot of these women are faced with having to juggle working from home, looking after the children, being excellent at work and also being excellent moms, and sort of juggling homeschooling. And also, I guess the business women as well, they have really struggled with just being at home 24/7 and just trying to be the best mom and trying to be, the best entrepreneur as well. So it has been particularly very challenging for many. And as you'd imagine, there's a whole lot of mental health issues that comes with that as well. So it has been particularly very challenging for women.
A lot of people are dubbing this period the pink collar recession because women have been disproportionately affected. As you said, childcare has been a major issue. A lot of the sectors that are the hardest hit have women working in the forefront, particularly retail and hospitality. But what about our community, the Black community, the Nigerian community? Many of us working in makeup, in catering, events. Do you think the government have put enough emphasis on them? What kind of advice would you give to women who are working in those sectors that are the toughest hit at the moment?
Do you know what? I have been hearing this popular word called pivoting. Everyone is just really thinking about what next they can do. I think it's particularly very challenging for our community. As you know, we've just announced, the UK has just announced an extension to the lockdown, and that means, a further no more parties and no more events. And the side hustle for most Nigerian women are around these events and all of that. And also to add to that, we can also see that the wedding numbers or event numbers have gone from 30 to 15, quite rightly so. So I guess really it's just the toughest. The toughest will definitely be the one standing. In terms of what they can do, I mean, there isn't much out there to support these sort of small businesses because most of them aren't really registered. And I think really the next thing really is to start thinking of what next to do, what you can do virtually. I mean, like you and I are speaking, there are lots of ideas and lots of opportunities, whether or not it's by taking your businesses online and just really finding how you can start making the means with what we currently have.
Absolutely. I know a couple of our viewers may know you from the Joe Maxwell show, but you're also a very highly skilled professional city worker. I've been to one of your PEP networking events, and there have been so many gains, haven't there, over the past couple of years. We are starting to see more Black women in the boardroom. We are starting to see more women at front-facing roles. But, the pandemic has showed the gap. There is a bigger gap that is widening. What are the kind of discussions you will be having with the women over the next couple of months? As you said, pivoting is one of the key words. What other kind of topics will you be discussing, not only on your show, but amongst your network?
I mean, I'll start by saying women of colour experience a double burden of racism and sexism that definitely requires a fresh approach towards tackling gender equality. And when you look at FTSE 100, for example, you would notice that there are about 99% of the people in chair, CFO and CEO roles are predominantly white. And I guess with what we currently have, I personally don't foresee a way where there will be an increase for us as a Black community if these numbers as of 2 years ago is ridiculous. And if you think about it, yes, the Black Lives Matter agenda, Black Lives Matter movement is meant to actually shine light into some of these challenges and hopefully help organizations to start thinking of how they can be how they can definitely increase the numbers. But I think to actually achieve these numbers, thinking about it from an organization perspective, organizations would need to be very intentional. And I can't really be saying to Black women to, up your skill and be educated, because we are very educated. And so I think it is really down to organizations being very intentional to increasing their Black talent pool. And I guess for us as Black women as well, we need to ensure that we are putting ourselves out there and making sure that when the opportunities does show its face, we are readily available to take on those.
Absolutely great advice there, Joe Maxwell. Joe Maxwell, host of the Joe Maxwell Show and founder of the PEP Network. Thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. Sadly, that's all we have time for today, but do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.